Welcome everybody to our final session of today, our fourth and final session. Again, Kirk Favre from the Federal Highway Administration will be presenting, and he'll be speaking about public involvement, Title VI, and environmental justice. Just a reminder to mute your mic if you're not speaking, and I may mute you myself if you forget. And I only do that just to try to preserve the audio quality, because we are recording this for the public and also for anybody who may not have been able to make it but wanted to participate, wanted to learn from this training. So if you have any questions, I'm sure Kirk wants to do what he did last time, which is feel free to jump in if you've got any questions or comments. We have only probably about 20 people in this meeting, and so there probably is a great opportunity for a discussion. So feel free to jump in. With that, but before I do, let me say, Kirk, Mr. Favre works with the Federal Highway Administration, has been a great help in helping us, the Laredo and Webb County Metropolitan Planning Organization, as we've been trying to scale up and do some new things here for the MPO and for the city and county. He's been a great resource. I'm very grateful he was able to make time for this training, and we hope to have him back. So with that, let me turn it to you, Kirk. Thank you very much for your time and for being able to do this training for us.
Thank you, Kirby. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, great. This afternoon, to close out this MPO 101 training session, we're going to talk about public involvement, public participation, and Title VI EJ, how it all links together as part of your public participation process within your MPO. I'd like to say thank you to Bill Frawley as well today for organizing this MPO 101 workshop and all the efforts that TTI has made to make this successful event today. So thank you, Bill. Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Carol, for being on today, and Brittany as well. Today I want to talk a little bit about the public involvement that Bill alluded to earlier, and how important it is, how critical it is as part of the planning process and statewide, both the statewide and metropolitan planning process. So next slide. So who's involved? I mean, if you looked at the photo gamut of everybody, it's a plethora of folks. Everyone you can think of, from the policy board, to technical committee, to citizens advisory committee, which is optional, the TxDOT, state DOT, the public transportation operators, everybody, including FTA and federal highway, and local citizens as well. Next slide. Bill mentioned that there's three different components to the planning process, three different products, and public involvement ranges throughout, from the Unified Planning Work Program to the Transportation Plan Development to the formation of the 4-year TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. And as the STIP gets developed, there's a public involvement coordination effort related to the STIP. So TIPs belong to the STIP, and the STIP at the statewide level goes through public participation and public comment period for 30 days. Next slide. This is just another slide of how the products fit together. Fortunately for the Laredo area, you have good air quality, so air quality conformity doesn't apply. But the CMP does. The congestion management process fits into your plan, the long-range metropolitan transportation plan, as well as your short-range program, the transportation improvement program. It all goes into your state TIP, the STIP, which I mentioned earlier, and that all is consistent with the state of Texas plan, which is not a project-specific plan. It's more of a policy plan. Next slide. The regulatory framework for public participation stems from Title 23 U.S. Code and the implementing regulation, which is the 23 Code of Federal Regulations 450.316. And it's basically the requirements for public participation, including adequate public notice, review and comment period of key decision points, and multiple accessible participation input formats, including electronic and in person. And during this COVID times, these challenging times, we've gone mostly virtual, and that's been built into your public participation process at your discretion. Next slide. So who is the public? The public includes any individual or group which is residing or is employed, has an interest in, or does business in the area within your metropolitan planning region or metropolitan planning area, your MPA boundary. It's important to include all public, private providers of transportation systems or services, including trucking and rail freight industries, intercity rail passenger, taxi cab operators, and all transit and paratransit service providers. They have an opportunity to participate, as well as low-income and minority populations known as Title VI and EJ. Title VI applies more to the minority populations, and environmental justice applies more to the low-income populations, but they're all collectively Title VI EJ, collectively known as transportation equity. Next slide. So federal interagency public involvement includes federal, state, and local agencies that have an interest in transportation. They play a particularly important role, and they have responsibility for administering their portion of the Title 23 or their portion of the title of code that applies to their agency. Federal highways and federal transit encourage MPOs and state DOTs to improve communication collaboration across the board among all the modes and all the different partners, including federal and state partners, to identify and address their concerns during the public comment period. Next slide. Public involvement ensures that the public, that the process is considering their needs, their preferences, and the fundamental objective of public involvement is to ensure that the concerns and issues of people that have the stake in the region, that the transportation decisions are being fairly identified and addressed. Early engagement with the public and brings in their diverse viewpoints and builds into a final product which everybody is satisfied with, including projects and programs that are better informed among the stakeholders. And it provides an opportunity to build mutual understanding and trust between agencies and the public they serve. So it's a continuous process that obtains input and informs both the public and the citizens, and as well as the agencies that have an interest in transportation within the region. Next slide. So what role do MPOs have in implementing public involvement as part of the public participation process? Well, MPOs are responsible for all the 3C process that we talked about earlier. Continuous, cooperative, comprehensive planning decisions that came out of the 62 Highway Act as a precursor for receiving federal funds. We need to fully evaluate the social, economic, and environmental consequences, the impacts that we're having on our region, and ensure the public have their support in adopting transportation and land use plans and community values, all integrated within the planning process. Public participation plan details the strategies for incorporating the visualization techniques, electronic media, including social media, and how to respond to public input, among other things. So the MPO must evaluate the effectiveness of the public participation plan on a cyclical basis. Next slide. Similar to the role of the MPOs, the state DOTs have a role in the public participation process at the statewide level, and that's in the formation of their state transportation improvement program and the state long-range plan. And also the state, through project development activities, has public participation requirements as part of the NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act process. So state DOT should coordinate with the MPOs across the state to avoid duplication of efforts, to have effective public involvement across all metropolitan, statewide, and rural or non-metropolitan transportation planning processes. Next slide. So what is the role of the transit operator? I know that El Metro is your regional transit operator within your region. So they have a dual role in the public involvement. They need to work closely with the MPOs to advocate their need for system improvements. And as appropriate, with public notice, transit operators may rely on the MPO's public involvement process to complement or meet their own public participation requirements associated with their change in service or fare structure. Next slide. What are the characteristics of an effective public participation process? Well, there are several different items that you need to address that are, successful for a successful public involvement process. A clearly defined purpose and objectives, identification of public and other stakeholder groups that are affected within the region, effective procedures for notifying the groups of the public involving project progress and other benchmarks, methods and measures for evaluating public involvement as part of your performance measures. Performance measures applied towards public involvement in terms of gauging how well you're doing, how well are you meeting the needs of the public within your planning process, and follow through with the MPOs to demonstrate that decision makers have considered public input as part of their project selection process is important. So that feedback is essential on whether or not the public involvement process is effective. Next slide. The transportation equity involves the needs of all transportation system users. US DOT, including Federal Highway Administration, which is a modal agency within the Department of Transportation, requires at the executive level and at the administrative level, through regulations and guidance, specific program requirements for achieving transportation equity when the planning and project development process. So considering equity early for those non-traditional folks that are either disabled or low income or minority groups are necessary in order to improve the planning process to come out with projects that meet the needs of all in society. Next slide. So what is Title VI of the Civil Rights Act? Back in 1964, during the LBJ years in the White House, he passed a landmark law that provided civil rights insurances that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in or denied the benefits of, or otherwise subjected to discrimination under any program or activity from which this recipient receives federal assistance from the U.S. Department of Transportation. So all the federal agencies fell into this category of meeting the needs of Title VI and non-discrimination and affording legal protection against discrimination. And there's other acts that protect age discrimination, ADA, which is Americans with Disabilities Act, which protects those that have disabilities, and disability discrimination. So there's a whole plethora of acts that are federally mandated, which are codified in Title VI and other codes and other sections and other acts that we must demonstrate compliance with. And we ensure that through our annual self-certification requirements that the MPO signs, the MPO policy board adopts, signs off on as well as reviewing them during the 4-year cycle of transportation TMA certification reviews. So that's where we check. We do a check, a balance and check to see if you're meeting those requirements. Next slide. So what is Executive Order 12898? That's the executive order that protects, it's meant to address environmental justice in minority populations and low-income populations. And the executive order came out of the U.S. Department of Transportation. The transportation administrator of the Secretary of the Department of Transportation signed off on this executive order back in 1994. And it includes taking action for avoiding, minimizing, or mitigating disproportionately high or adverse human health and environmental effects and economic, social effects on minority and low-income populations. So it ensures fair, full, meaningful participation in the transportation decision-making process by all those potentially affected communities and prevents the denial of or reduction in significant delay in the receipt of benefits by minority and low-income populations. And these orders have been amended to support 12898, and the updated US DOT order was issued on May 2nd, 2012. Next slide. What other executive orders affect transportation equity? Well, there's limited English proficiency executive order, the LEP, that we look for as part of your public participation process. That was issued in 2000. And for those who have limited English proficiency, it provides them an opportunity to partake, have meaningful access to benefits, and work within the realm of the MPO to provide input, which is valued for the decision-making process. The DOT has LEP guidance, which provides extensive information and guidelines on self-assessment, as well as other materials. If you'd like to have a copy, we have it available in our office. And taking together all these requirements to find an overarching commitment to provide transportation equity in our decision-making process. Next slide. So what role do state DOTs, MPOs, and public transportation providers, including public transit, play in incorporating non-discrimination and EJ transportation planning? It's a question that we've struggled with over the years, but we came up with the conclusion that we need to do all that we can to protect those segments of the population, regardless of their race, national origin, income, age, disability. The state DOTs and MPOs and public transit operators must comply with Title VI and must be implementing a Title VI program. And we do that check periodically through our certification reviews to gauge how well it's working and what performance measures you've been identified within the realm of EJ and Title VI. And they're incorporated. The results of these analyses are shown primarily in your public participation plan, but the results are also shown in your Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the state's long-range transportation plan, the state transportation improvement program, or the local TIP transportation improvement program, and identified as part of your unified planning work program. Next slide. There's other Title VI circulars and Civil Rights Act amendments that clarify the intent of Congress with respect to Title VI and EJ. And this is just a reference to all the different laws and statutes and related circulars, both on the federal highway and federal transit side. Next slide. And these are additional acts and orders and circulars that apply to civil rights and non-discrimination on age as well as disability. Next slide. There's additional resources available through the Federal Highway Planning website. There's NTI courses, which are free. I'll put in a plug for National Transit Institute courses because they're free. There's no charge for bringing them to your locality, and they provide an excellent opportunity to learn more about Title VI and EJ. TxDOT, the state of DOT, the state of Texas DOT, has an Office of Civil Rights. They have put out a compliance assessment tool. And this compliance assessment tool should be used by the local public agencies and transit authorities to gauge how well you're complying with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 under Title VI. There's a website there to download the compliance assessment form and tool. And I suggest that you look at that as part of your certification, your self-certifications, and your 4-year TMA certification reviews. We'll probably be asking those types of questions as part of those efforts. For additional information on civil rights, including Americans with Disabilities Act and Title VI, there's a civil rights website, and FTA has a civil rights website as well. For environmental justice and for federal highway and post-federal highway and federal transit has resources on those as well. I've kind of just summarized what the requirements are, but these get into more the weeds on how to do the analysis, how to do the finding that there's compliance with the Civil Rights Act and Title VI and EJ. But are there any questions out there on Title VI or EJ? I know I've run through these really quickly. We have time now for questions and answers. I have more questions and answers, but I'll try to get to them. I'll try to get to whatever. Bill, did you have one?
Yeah, Kirk, I've got something that comes up, especially it seems like in some of the border cities, MPOs, or even some of the ones that are inland that have high minority populations. And can you give a little bit of insight as to, okay, so when you're trying to reach out to the minority groups and make sure they're included, make sure they're not harmed unnecessarily with the projects, when you have 80-90% or more of the population, one ethnic group like Hispanic, how do you really kind of zone in on looking at minority populations, trying to keep in mind Title VI and those types of things?
Well, I know talking to Kirby during the certification review, we had 95.5% Hispanic. And that means the minority is the majority for the region. And so you can zone in on low income, looking at populations which are low income and minority, and kind of identify those through your public participation process. But in many areas in Texas, we're going to see the Hispanic population outgrow over the next 25 years the other races. And so it's going to be a statewide issue. We're seeing minority growth, Hispanic growth at a rate higher than other ethnic groups. By 2050, we're looking at 50 million population in Texas, possibly, according to state demographer. And so how do we address the minority populations within our region. I don't have all the answers today to tell you how it's going to happen, how it's going to play out. But it's coming. I mean, it's not just a few cities on the border. It's the entire state, that we're going to see majority minority communities grow. We're going to have limited English proficiency plans throughout the state so that we can have Spanish to English or English to Spanish conversions on our websites. We're going to have meaningful dialogue. I know that San Antonio has done an excellent job of preparing videos in both Spanish and English to address the populations that are affected within the region. And that provides everyone an opportunity to participate in the planning process by having those videos, which are low cost, and the staff creates their own videos. So I don't have all the answers, Bill. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm just a Fed. I'm just here to help you, but I try to provide you the best information I can. And I don't have all the answers today on that question, but throw me another bone.
No, but I think you helped make the point that there's a variety of things that can be looked at when you're trying to comply with both Title VI and environmental justice. And if there is a majority minority, so to speak, then like you said, start honing in on low income, maybe those who are dependent on transit because of low automobile ownership and so on. Is that a pretty fair summary?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. You answered and you provided help.
Excellent question. Can somebody give me an easy softball question like I can tee off on?
How many spots are on a leopard?
Good question. I haven't caught a leopard yet. Have you?
Twice as many as half. See, don't overthink it.
Twice as many as half. Okay. I'm still trying to figure out how to put air in my tire, replace all the air in my tire, Bill.
I had another question in case someone hasn't thought of this also. There's been, and you may not have the answer, but I'm just kind of curious to see. There's been some discussion at different MPOs regarding public involvement and outreach. Someone had once said recently that they can, at least cities, have been able to avoid posting public notices in local newspapers by posting something on the Texas Register. Does that make sense? Ring a bell at all, Kirk? Or
I think they need to follow their public participation process. If their public participation process calls for them publishing in a newspaper, then they should be publishing in a newspaper unless they modify their public participation process to.
And that's what they've done. Some of them have actually apparently thought about at least modifying the public participation process to where they don't have to publish in the newspaper. But does that violate any kind of a federal code that you're aware of?
No. I think
Bill, are you talking about the Texas Tribune? Is that right?
No, the Texas Tribune is I think that's still a private publication, even though it's online. I think it was the Texas Register, but I guess, Kirk, you're helping to get to where I was going is there's not a federal requirement that you have to publish in a newspaper.
No.
Is that correct? It's basically as long as you're getting the information out there that's accessible to the public. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, if you look in the Title 23 or the CFR Code of Federal Regulations, there's no requirement for posting in a newspaper. But I think the Texas Administrative Code, is it the Open Meetings Act requirement that they're trying to meet when they're posting it, in advance through a
that may be what it's coming to. Okay.
So it might be in the state requirements, not the federal.
Okay, well, that helps out some. Thanks. I just know a lot of MPOs have started to struggle, especially when they have to, and this could go for cities, transit agencies, anyone, when they have to post meetings, it's very expensive. And especially if they have to call special meetings, it can cost a lot of money to post in a newspaper of general circulation. So
Might be more cost effective to do it electronically.
mhm.
And that way they'd save a bundle of money of their PL funds. But maybe I should go back and talk to Mike and Jose about that question.
Okay.
We have to ponder it a little bit.
Yeah, and if you get something, we can help put that out through Tempo or something, probably.
Okay.
Thanks.
Just to throw that some feedback into that process, I know in Texas it's through the Secretary of State's office for the open meetings postings. So
Okay.
you would register as a liaison for your organization, and then you're able to submit new open meetings information to the Secretary of State. And it actually depends on the type of government entity. For example, my organization is a multi-jurisdictional, multi-county region. So we have to notify our headquarter county clerk's office plus the Secretary of State's office and make sure that those posting requirements are met. So it's a Texas regulation. It varies depending on the government organization type.
Oh, thanks, Juan.
There's your answer.
All right.
Any other questions before we call it a day? If you have any questions, you want to talk to us offline, Bill and I are, if you look at the next slide, I think I've got my contact information, don't I? Or maybe not. I have a blank screen. Okay. I don't have a contact information there, but Bill showed it earlier during his presentation. And feel free to contact us at any time. And y'all, thank you for your participation today. I think I'm going to open the floor to Kirby to say some closing comments. And Bill, thank you all for this opportunity to participate. And I've enjoyed it, and I hope I get invited back. Thank you.
Kirk?
Yes, sir.
Bill?
Yes, sir.
The Federal Highway Administration, Texas Transportation Institute, Texas TxDOT, we're very grateful for your involvement today. This, again, is the beginning of hopefully additional trainings that we'll do periodically. And we really appreciate your time, and not only the time today presenting, but also the time that you took to prepare your presentations. We will provide a recording of all these sessions to everybody that was on the original mailing list. We'll also push it out on our website, and we will provide these presentations as well on our website for those that want them. So thank you very much for everybody that took the time. We appreciate your involvement. When an MPO is done the best, it's an opportunity for all the players to come together at the table, have a seat, have a discussion, and we problem solve together. And we really believe that here. So we want to make sure we're bringing everybody together, providing training for everybody, information. If there's anything we can help you with, and we're staffing up so that we can help not only with doing planning projects internally, but also be a resource for other departments, for the city, for the county, and for other organizations here, for all topics related to transportation. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and rest of your week, and we'll see you again sometime soon.
Y'all be safe.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.